And we are back. It's time for another Chalk Talk, everyone. And today you are in for a special treat because Julius Thomas is here. And I know that you're pumped up about this, Hale. It's almost like National Tight End Day here on the show at Chalk Talk. But hey, we have one of the great tight ends of the modern football era. If you know football, you know Julius Thomas, and you know that Julius was a baller.
Absolutely. And like you said, Adam, it feels like it's National Tight End Day here. I grew up a massive fan of Julius Thomas, and I got to say, it is a treat to get to talk to him today. If you guys don't know who Julius is, or maybe you've heard the name and maybe don't know all of his stats and things that he's done, let me just say, as someone who came after him as a tight end, he's really on the cusp and is the main reason why there even is a national tight end today, why there even is an emphasis on blocking and running and catching and this multifaceted athlete now that the tight end is versus a glorified tackle that they were long ago. So quick bio on Julius. So he was selected in the fourth round of the 2011 NFL draft to the Denver Broncos. Played basketball in college, by the way, and he's not the only tight end who's done that. There's a couple other great tight ends who have done that along the way. Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates, who have made that transition from an excellent athlete on the basketball court to being a standout tight end in the NFL. He ran a blazing 4.68, excuse me, in the 40-yard dash, which is extremely fast and is a good testament to the athlete that he is. He had a monster 2013 and 2014 NFL season, racked up a ton of catches, 24 touchdowns over those two seasons, by the way, which is an incredible number for a tight end, and had a fantastic career with multiple teams. As you can see, Julius certainly elevated the tight end position to where it is today. You have guys like Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, who are benefiting from how Julius and other tight ends at his time changed the game. And I certainly saw that firsthand as a big fan of the position. And he helped revolutionize it. So, Julius, over to you. I wanted to make sure people understood who you were, but it's great to have you, my friend, and we are excited to get to talk to you today.
I appreciate you guys for the great introduction. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. I'm just really excited about the things that you guys are doing, just really being on the cutting edge of technology and sports and data, right? And I'm a big believer that that's the future. I have some thoughts and different things I would love to share with you guys, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with your audience. So it's going to be a great conversation. Thank you guys for having me, and I'm excited to get rolling.
That's fantastic. And let's get right into it. Love that you're here today. This is going to be a fun conversation for us and for our listeners. So let's really talk about why you're here and help us understand what NFL players and other professional athletes contend with physically and mentally throughout their lives. Now, from an NFL perspective, player health and safety has really been in the spotlight the past few seasons, not just here at Zebra, certainly with everything we're doing with the next gen stats and then also supporting NFL player health and safety. But certainly in the public arena, we're seeing things like Tua suffer these concussions. You've got Xavier Newman who had to get carted off the field with a scary neck injury. And it strikes a chord. I mean, even though, in the NFL, they're wearing the highest rated safety equipment from helmets, pads, and other protective gear, this is still an impact sport. And you hear medical professionals equate the NFL game as to the equivalent of a series of car crashes. Julius, tell us about what you're seeing in this realm and give our audience a little background about some of the focus areas you're working on.
Oh, great. I mean, there's a lot of things to touch on there. And, the first thing that I really want to share that I'm seeing is really the product of what science can do with a young human being across 10, 20 years of their life to create the type of performance that we're seeing in today's games across sports. It is really phenomenal, the type of athletes that we're seeing, really the longevity that has now started to become created are really starting to integrate this data, this science piece. The first thing I look out and I see the world's best athletes we've ever had, and I see them doing something they love. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a sports buff, so I'm watching as many different competitions as I can. But to transition a little bit more into the player health and safety side, as I was leaving the game to walk into this new career and pursue this new drive and passion I had in life, I was really committed to wanting to have an impact in player health and safety. And so one of the first things I did when I walked away from the game, I called up the NFL and I was like, hey, I got this crazy idea. I'm going to try and get a doctorate in psychology, but how can I help? Like, how can I get involved in player health and safety? And one of the first groups that they introduced me to was the Football Players Health Study at Harvard, which they started in 2016, 2017. The NFL donated millions and millions of dollars to this research group to have them study former player health. And that's everything from, head injuries like concussions, to better understand the risks associated with that, all the way to some of the things that are the most common causes of mortality and morbidity in former players, like cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea, diabetes, things like that. So really, with the Football Players Health Study at Harvard, we're looking at the entire spectrum of former player health. It's something that I've really enjoyed, been able to publish some academic research articles with them. So I really get a chance to look at the data on the back end, which is something that has become kind of central to what I do in this health and wellness space. Outside of that, also being able to be a member of the Joint Behavioral Health Committee between the NFL, FLPA, where we just study player health and wellness, the Mackey White Health and Safety Committee, where every year we get to sit down and look at some of the great data that you guys have helped capture, and then start to try to, find opportunities to make the game safer. What I can say that it's consistently happening in the background that most people aren't aware of is that every single year, some of the greatest minds in research in medicine are doing everything they can to make the game safer. That's from mental health to physical health to really now even starting to look at, the biomarkers, right? Which is going to create a whole new lane of data that's going to be important for helping us to really make the game safer and to help people perform at a higher level. And what's interesting is they go hand in hand. So it's really a win-win.
Wow. How about that? And no, I think we can all relate in the sense that certainly, you and Hill having been professional athletes and myself being a competitive individual over time and the different things that I've done and being around the league, supporting next stats. And certainly the players out there are faster than they've ever been. They're bigger than they've ever been. Their muscle mass, to your point, science, technology, you look at, the young kids out there, they have player tracking data in high school. Young kids have golf apps. People are tracking their sleep. They're tracking what they eat. Probably no greater time than now are we seeing the most beneficial benefits and impact of the science and technology that's out there. And certainly the things that you're doing, it's got to be really gratifying for you to be able, you're doing. I just want to share with our audience that, as noted, you retired from the NFL in 2018 at the peak of your career to pursue a doctorate in psychology. You then went on to study clinical health psychology and became a player advisor, board member in the football player health study department at Harvard University. And then more recently, you co-founded a neural strength solutions company and now serve as the vice president of the Society of Sports Neuroscience. Clearly, you're concerned about the athlete's brain health in addition to their physical and mental health.
No, 100%. I'll tell you guys a story. It's something I'll never forget when I was, kind of getting to this point towards the end of my career where I just had a lot of thoughts and I was thinking about things that maybe typical athletes aren't thinking about. And a lot of them were health and safety related. They always talk about how, the rose can grow from a concrete. And me being a guy that had a lot of significant injuries throughout his career, I unfortunately got trapped in the training room, spent hours and hours in there. And through my own injuries and my own recoveries, trying to understand what's happening with the human body. And I never forget in my last season down in Miami, I asked one of the athletic trainers, I said, what's all this going on with CTE, man? Just tell me what's happening. And he looked at me and he said, hey, it's not something you need to worry about. It's not something that we understand. Just play football. And I was like, okay, cool. Sounds all right. I checked, right? I did my due diligence. But then funny, 8 months after that to say, hey, I'm going to leave my career and I'm going to go to pursue psychology. I actually met a great mentor of mine, Dr. Jamie Tarter, who's a neuroscientist. And she really kind of took me under her wing. She would always ask me, like, how worried were you about your brain? How worried were you about your brain? I told her, never thought about it once. I was worried about my knees. I was worried about my neck. I was worried about not getting a physical injury, but not the brain. And I realized that there was something that she knew that I didn't know. And so shortly after that, we did a study called the Contact Sports Brain Study, where we looked at current and former football players, current and former MMA fighters, and current and former boxers. And we compared them to healthy, active, exercising individuals. And we said, let's kind of take a look and see what's going on with the brain. And the very most interesting part about it was that there wasn't a big cognitive difference between both groups, the control group and experimental group. The biggest difference was in the emotional state. And it showed that, current and former NFL players had lower life satisfaction, lower emotional states than healthy, active, exercising South Florida controls. Right, that really stood out to me, and that was kind of how I started to really get passionate about understanding of what was happening from the neck up. Because for so long, what we've done in sports and what we still do really well is we measure amazing from the neck down. But to understand what's happening in the brain environment and what's happening in cognition, we haven't made that leap yet. So that's one of the things that I'm really interested in, that I get excited about. And I think that that's something we'll be looking at more in the future. But, over these last 6 to 7 years of really studying the brain in the contact sport athlete, I can say that I'm more encouraged today than I was a year out. That I think that there's been a lot of recent research and studies that show, yes, contact sports is not the safest thing for the human being, but through applications like being able to track data, to be able to aggregate huge, massive amounts of health data, to make inferences and then use those to change the way we play the game, we're making the games safer than they've ever been. And I think the future is bright for young contact sport athletes.
Absolutely. And Julius, one thing that's really stark to me, and it really speaks to me as a former player as well, is just how quickly you jumped into that next passion of yours, that next career of yours. I think one thing that anybody can feel, and goes to all Zebra Nation, all of our listeners out there, is, hey, I think I want to do this. I'm doing this and I love it. It's my dream job. It's awesome, whether that's, in accounting or sales, or maybe you're a player in the NFL, right? I can't imagine doing anything else other than this. And then something else happens, right? You get let go, tragedy happens, and you got to find something new, right? It's amazing how quickly you jumped into that and you found that new passion, and just your ability to say, this is what my life's going to be about now. This is going to be my life's work. And for me, I think, I certainly struggled with that as well. And I know plenty of former players do too. It's just that what's next. And for you to still be involved in the game and still be able to have that drive is really something that stuck out to me. And I'm extremely proud of the work that you're doing. So just kudos to you for that. And thank you for continuing to drive forward. And I think all of Zebra Nation and our listeners can appreciate that. So that's awesome. I hope everyone understands just how difficult that is to go from spending your whole life as a football player to now what am I going to do? So that's awesome.
No, I really appreciate that a lot. And, I will say that one of the things that was beneficial for me was that I've already transitioned. And that was such a unique part about being a professional athlete, to have already had to transition from this place where you had a sense of mastery, right? I knew what I could do. Like as a basketball player, I was okay, not great, but I understood the game. I understood what my role was. I'm the senior captain, right? I understand what everyone's supposed to be doing on the court, and going and walking on to the football field and knowing nothing, and going from, man, I've got it all figured out, I'm comfortable here, to, man, going to the bottom, right? And I use this mountain analogy a lot in my company, Optimal Performance. And it's, if you go to the peak down to the valley, it's a hard transition. But then going to the peak in football and then going back down into the valley again, what happens next after football, and now trying to go back to the peak in human performance. And well, it's something that, I'm seasoned at. And it's one of the things that I'm most committed to, right? Transitions are hard for everyone. Transitions are hard when you go from sixth grade to middle school, when you go from being married to being divorced, you name it. We're always experiencing transitions. And so I really like to do and stay involved and do a lot of work with people that are transitioning, because there's just a natural lack of confidence, a lack of belief, a lack of mastery that can feel very heavy. And I really try to encourage people to move through that. I call it a phase of transition. Transition is not a static thing. It's kind of like a desert that you got to walk through. And because I've traversed that desert a couple times, I really like to work with others. One of the other companies that I work with is Pro Athlete Community, where we focus a lot on helping football, basketball, soccer, baseball, former professional athletes transition into their next thing. And I've got a heart for that. So it's something that I love being involved in.
I love that. That reminds me, when we talked to Sean Payton, he talked about during training camp, talking to his players and saying that you have to have grit. It takes grit to get through training camp. It takes grit to get through the day. And we talk about that in the sense of everything we do here in a corporate landscape. And I absolutely love, the metaphor and the example of any sort of transition. It's not static. It's not going to last forever. But you know what? Sometimes you got to grit and bear it, grind, and you got to execute. You just got to keep going. And that's awesome. And I want to get back to, we talked about it and you mentioned the NFL is putting a big emphasis on player health and safety, making investments into monitoring technologies such as what we're doing here at Zebra for the NFL. But do you feel enough is being done at the league levels, and not only the NFL, but if you look at the other, contact sport leagues, from racing to boxing, MMA, soccer, motorsports? Certainly football players aren't the only ones who are having these intense physical stresses. What is your opinion as you take in all these other sports?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, if I had to think about and ask, do I think enough is being done? I would say yes. I think that most professional sports organizations have a dedicated group of people, right? Take the NFL, for example. They probably have 40, 50 of the best physicians, researchers in the world trying to analyze data and to help take that data to help make the game safer. So, yes, I think that they've reached a threshold of they're doing enough to try and help. And I always say, not to be overly critical, but I always give it like a B, right? Like, that's enough. Like you're doing enough. But I think that there's another opportunity to take it even further. And I think that one of the big challenges is professional sports organizations capture so much data, right? Like I could imagine if I talk to some people on your teams, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, come meet with us. Like take a trip to come visit, and we'll show you all the data we're capturing." But one of the big challenges is that data doesn't make it into academia. So you've got all the data and information about injury, about forces, about number of you name it, and you can't get it to the broader scientific community so that we can start using that information and that data to help make the broader population healthy. And one of the things that I'm really excited about in my new role as the mental performance specialist for the San Antonio Spurs and a member of UT Health is we're looking at how can we take what we're doing with the world's greatest athletes and use what we're learning there to strengthen and empower the community, because that's a connection people don't see. Yes, the professional sports leagues have the resources to capture data, and we know how expensive data is to capture, to store. That's a challenge, and thank you guys for all the work you're doing there. But what people don't recognize is that professional sports leagues are going to be able to start using all this information to help make the general person healthier, to help make the general person more resistant to illness and disease, and or more effective physical rehabilitation. So as these jumps start to happen, we're going to start to see overall human health and well-being increase because of our ability to capture data and understand it. And I would say I think we're doing enough, but I would like to see them open up the access to that data so that more scientists can start to do more research studies and we can start to have more confirmed or not confirmed hypotheses.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And Julius, one thing that is very near and dear to any professional athlete, right, is the ability to know your own body, to study your own body, to invest in it. Because like anything, right, that's your greatest tool out there, and it's who you are. And unfortunately, we get defined by our bodies a lot in this space because that is who we are, right? That's how you keep a job. And so for you, certainly you've been on a path of discovery. You've probably learned quite a bit now compared to what you knew as a player. I know I can't imagine maybe the tools that you have in your toolbox now. But you look across the NFL, guys like Russell Wilson and Derrick Henry, who have documented, millions of dollars that they spend on their body every year for upkeep and just to keep it performing at a high level. You know, you've talked a lot about helping others and how these studies can go to help, human health and player health and all this stuff like this. But how has it helped your own self out? I mean, have you used your research to be able to say, hey, I need to be doing this more, or if I just incorporate this, maybe this will help my brain health, in a long-term capacity? What have been your benefits personally from doing these studies?
Oh, that's a great point. And, we're starting to have some great examples from the pro sports arena that help us understand really the value of taking care of ourselves. And, you talk about your Russell Wilsons, your Tom Brady's, and now we've got like the proof. It's here that you do this the right way. It adds up to helping you to be more effective for longer. But for me, I can tell you how humbling it is and how it becomes a part of my passion and part of why I started Optimal Performance and what I do there comes through really recognizing how much I didn't know. Like here I am, a professional athlete playing at the highest level that you can play in the world and still knowing very little about my health. And when you think about, a pro sports environment, the players are not the health experts, the health professionals are the experts. And then they're doing most of the strategy, dieting, training, how we train. They're doing it for you. So I actually didn't know how to maintain and build my own health. And so much I have learned from studying health psychology, everything from, how do I manage and prevent mental health illness and disease. I say the biggest frustrating thing that I saw in the clinical space was that people come to me when they're already suffering in a really rough place. And the hardest thing is, as a clinician, I don't have any cures. I have treatments. And when you start to spend a lot of time in medical settings, you go, dang, since we can't cure things, it's actually better to prevent things than to wait for people to get ill and then treat them. But we haven't made that jump in the medical space. And that's really what I wanted to do with Optimal Performance is how do I actually start this army of prevention? And I think that that's where companies like Zebra come in, is because we can't prevent without data, just like we can't treat illness without imaging. But we got to get data that helps us see risk long before we reach a disease. And so some of the things that I'm able to do is understand, what are the necessary molecules and supplements that your body needs to be able to function at a high level, right? Let's take brain health. Understanding, what the different omegas can do for you. Understanding about supplements like creatine and how much research is out and how valuable that can be for cognition. Understanding the value of sleep, understanding the value of daily exercise. Something that's really concerning and like it breaks my heart every time I think about it is only 3% of Americans meet the daily recommendations for sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress management, and healthy substance use. And we talk about this chronic illness and disease challenges we have as a country. And I think one of the big reasons is we can't track well enough for everyone yet. And so I get excited when I think about companies like Zebra because I go, yeah, today, but in the future, we're going to be able to track the things and give us, clinicians and health professionals enough time to play with the data. We'll start finding the signals that are in the noise. And we're going to see a huge jump in human health, which for the first time in, several decades, we've actually saw the life expectancy of the average US adult tick down. And for me, we have too much resources and too many talented people for that to be the case.
Wow. Julius, that was so valuable to hear you say, and certainly for our listening members out there. One thing, my old track coach, Bill Tarasky, used to say, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And this was, out there and taking care of your body, getting yourself ready. The other things that you talked about, certainly, think of any of us. If you're out there, you're passionate about pickleball, or you're out there and you want to run a 5K to a marathon. And I'm in this journey myself where I'm talking to my wellness doctor about my magnesium levels. We're talking about my sleep. We're talking about creatine. We're talking about my vitamin B and D, all these things, and for muscle repair. And I want to shout out to Zebra because our company does a great job. We have our own wellness app called Well. I just got an alert the other day that I can get actual more money into my H account for next year if I go get my blood work done and I do some online coaching. So the opportunities are there. And to your point, Julius, a lot of us aren't taking the time or the research to figure out and have those kinds of conversations. So I'm glad that you brought that up today because everybody can do more for themselves and they can get educated. It's an easy world for us to Google or whatever your favorite app is, but then also to get online and look at these studies and how you can improve your own functionality, because it will also translate from your personal life to your professional life and positive outcomes. So
can I jump in and take that another step further? Because what you said is so true. I was actually reading a study the other day that was on people in the UK, and they showed that like 80 to 90% of employees want to work for a place that supports their well-being. But only 25% of employees utilize the services and products that companies provide. And they showed that of the 25% of people that utilize it, 85% of those people said, this is valuable, worthwhile, and it's helping to improve my well. And so I really want to encourage all the employees you guys have is to utilize these resources. because Dr. Tom Mayer is a great friend of mine. He's the head medical physician for the NFL. He has this concept called joy span. And he said, for so long in a medical environment, we've looked at lifespan. How long can a person be alive? But that's not really life. How long a person can be alive is different than how long can a person do and engage with the people and the things that they love. And so all that work that you put in, getting your blood test, working with a health coach, utilizing different counseling services, I'm sure that you guys have available, or the app to be able to help you make sense of it, because it's not easy. I will be the first person to say that the normal person will be lost in wellness understanding for a couple of years. But man, when people utilize it, we actually do see such a tremendous value for people and how long they can function in a healthy way. And that matters, right? I want to be 70, out in the backyard, getting up, picking up the grandkids. And it doesn't happen for all Americans. And, I've spent enough time in hospitals to really want to encourage people. And I'll always be an advocate of this work.
I love that. Joy span. Certainly, an investment in your health is you either do it now or you do it later, potentially, right? Let's get into some of that joy span in the sense that you retired after 7 years in the NFL, great career across the Denver Broncos, here with the Jaguars, finished out your career with the Dolphins. But tell us, what was that decision point like for you to decide that performed at the highest levels of the NFL, Pro Bowler, played in a Super Bowl, blessed to do and play that game? Take us a little bit through that. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, now we're going to get deep, and I hope you guys are comfortable to go there. I'm going to model vulnerability and authenticity because I think we all need to do it a little bit more. And to tell you the truth, one of the main reasons was that I wasn't fully happy. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that. I guess I always had this idea that there was a certain job, there was a certain amount of money, there was a certain type of house, there was a certain type of car, that if I had all these things, it would make me happy. And I was actually one of the fortunate and unfortunate people that got all those things. And here I am, 26 years old, sitting in the house of stuff of my dreams and going, damn, why am I not happy? I thought this was supposed to feel a certain way. I thought I was going to work hard my whole life and I was going to get to this point and it was going to feel fulfilling. And that's just not the case. And I've heard so many examples and other people share that same story. It won't happen. What you have to be able to do is you have to be living in the way that makes you most fulfilled and doing the things that you think make your life valuable. And for me, the piece that I was always missing as an athlete was to be able to build and grow intellectually. Like everything was about neck down. And I actually had two really rough conversations because I had two coaches and two separate stops in my career tell me, hey, Julius, your ideas and the things you're suggesting, like, okay, but we don't pay you to think, we pay you to run. And I was like, damn. And it really helped me to recognize that I was never going to be able to fully step into the intellectual part of who I am, into the potential that I have, unless I went to do something else. But then at the same time, I also started to discover my passion for helping other people. And it was weird. Like, wait, am I enjoying helping other people more than I am helping myself? And I started to just accept it and recognize I want to spend the rest of my life helping other people put more awards on their wall, having better health and well-being, being able to love and lean into their families and friends more. And if I'm doing that, then I'm going to feel very fulfilled. So as I was walking away from the game, I had to ask myself, are you going to follow your heart again? Because I had to follow my heart that first time to go into playing football. Like, do you want to go play basketball overseas? Or, yeah, there's that little piece in your spirit that's saying, hey, we'll go this way. And it was easy to listen to it when I was broke and when I was trying to make a life for myself. But can I listen to it again when it comes back up, when you have it all? And then to follow that again, and now to be in a place where, I get to run a company where I get to work with some of the largest organizations, high performing teams, and help them understand how to find balance between their mental performance and their mental well-being. And I go to sleep and I feel great every time I put my head on the pillow.
Absolutely. And Julius, thank you for the vulnerability, my friend. I know it's difficult, and I can certainly commiserate, and I've felt that same exact feeling before, and I can certainly add on to vulnerability. I remember the lowest point in my life was probably one of the highest points that you would think from the outside was my rookie year, 2019, with the Indianapolis Colts. I loved the organization; it was awesome. Loved everything about it, and I was scrapping to make the roster as the fourth tight end taken, and I made it. I made the opening day roster, and I just remember thinking to myself, if I can just make this roster, I will be so happy. Like, just praying and hoping. Like, this is what I want. I got to get it. I got to get it. And it finally happened. And that stark reality of, oh, and I get cut the next day. Like that. Like, it just felt like the weight of the world crashing down on my shoulders. And you play a little bit and stuff like that. I ended up getting cut, actually, and from that standpoint, I really understood that there is so much more to life than your job, the goals that you go after, those things. It's about your family, your connections. And it's the same thing for any listener, right? Anyone out there in our listener base that says, if I can just get that director level, if I can just get that V level or whatever level, then I'll finally be happy. Then I'll have what I want. And to me, I was so lucky to feel that at 22 years old, to say, yes, this is what I want, but this isn't who I am, because it's a small portion of your overall lifespan. So I really appreciate you sharing that vulnerability, because I can feel that. And I know our listeners out there have felt that before, at least once in their life, that there's so much more to life than your title and your job. It's about who you fill your life with, your friends, your family, people like that. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you as well. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, the big concept right now in the corporate space is psychological safety, right? And I talk with a lot of leaders and they say, well, how do we increase psychological safety? And I tell people, well, they have to feel safe that they can express what they're feeling internally. And so, what you're modeling here, opportunities like this podcast for the rest of the employees to listen to, it starts to create a culture where people can come in, they can talk about what's happening inside, where people can come to work and be strengthened to go home, not drained to go home, because that becomes its own vicious cycle.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Julius. I love what you said there. I think everyone can feel that and can absolutely take a page from that, and that's fantastic. So I want to pivot a little bit, and that's a great discussion, but you talked about retirement, and certainly the issues that came up with that and the reasons behind that. And it seems like, Julius, I'd like to pivot towards the youth today and what they're dealing with. And it seems like what I've felt in my local community, in the communities, my father's a football coach back in Missouri at my old high school, and it feels like he is even seeing too in certain communities that less and less parents are letting their kids play football nowadays because of what's been brought to light with player health and safety, with concussions. It feels like more than ever there's more light around it, which is good, but the bad part of that is now there may be not as many kids who are wanting to play, and certainly parents are having to make that difficult choice. What sports do we want our kids to play? And certainly, there's a lot of discussion around that, and I think that that's challenging, especially due to the violent nature of football, the possibility of life-altering injuries. At its core, football is a violent sport. If you did what you did on the field and you went down to your local 7-Eleven, you'd be arrested, right? You'd be thrown in jail. It's a violent sport. So can you just talk a little bit about how we can arm, or if a parent out there is listening and says, hey, I love my fifth grader to play tackle football, but I'm just on the fence to let them do that. What do they need to be doing? How can you arm parents to have that discussion with their kids, or arm children to have that discussion with their parents to say, hey, I want to do this, and this is why it can be safe. Here are the risks involved. But just talk a little bit about that. How would you have that conversation maybe with your kids?
No, I love that. So I'll first like to say, I'm a father of three sons, and my 5-year-old, he's asking me like, yeah, Dad, when can I play football? And I've actually spent a lot of time researching and studying the literature and understanding what are the actual risks of participating in youth tackle football. And you hear things like, well, we all want to wait till age 12, right? Like this age 12 number has shown up in conversations across our country. And I kind of understand where that comes from. When you start to truly look at the data, and there was a systematic review done by a researcher at Harvard University, probably the most published researcher in concussion ever. and his team did a systematic review. And they said, we really got to start talking about the risks involved with football in two separate groups. And this, I think, is really important for everyone to hear. And I hope that people can open up their hearts and minds to hearing this. So you've got professionals, and then you have amateurs. The risks to professionals are much different than the risks to amateurs. And so what their research group wanted to do is they wanted to look at cognition between older adults that played football at an amateur level and older adults that didn't play contact sports. And when you look at those populations of people, cognitively, they're very similar. No statistical differences, insignificant difference. Now, for professional athletes, yes, there was a difference in cognition between pros and non contact sports athletes later in life. So, one of the things that I always tell people to do is what you need to start understanding is your child an amateur? If your child playing fifth grade football, that's much different than playing NFL football. The forces, the weight, the training, it's all completely different. And then you can start to think about the examples in your own life. Like football has been a very popular youth sports activity for a long time in our country. But you're not seeing the men that played football until high school suffering from a ton of cognitive or physical deficits later in life, right? They tend to be like all the rest of the guys their age, even into the college level, right? Some people in college can get some devastating injuries. Don't let me glaze past that. But by and large, they're not the ones that are suffering. Now, if you're like Brett Favre, for example, and you play 20 years and you're the baddest, toughest dude in the NFL because you got the most games, yeah, you can see something. If you're Luke Kuechly and guys that I played against, but if you lead the entire nation in tackles for 10 straight years, spanning from college to the pros, you've created a lot of impact. And so there can be his career was ended early due to concussion. So those things happen, but by and large, when you start to understand, when would you like to get an ankle injury? Would you like to get an ankle injury when you were 7, or would you like to get an ankle injury when you're 47? Really, we have to understand that the human body recovers and heals much better at these younger ages. So when I'm speaking to audiences and when I'm talking with people, I'm always recommending that people recognize that, hey, the risk is really on the pro side. At the youth side, yes, there's things that can happen, unfortunate concussion. And yes, if your kid's had 5 concussions in youth tackle football, it's probably time to have them hang it up. But another company I actually had a conversation with the other day was Guardian caps, right? Like, why are we not wearing Guardians in youth football? And so, as a parent, you should be advocating for that. When you look at the data and how much concussion, so how many concussions have been reduced at the pro level, those should be on every little kid's head when they're playing youth tackle football. And what was interesting, not just the reduction of concussion, but also the reduction of fractures and other injuries, because now you have a soft helmet instead of a hard one.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for that, Julius. I mean, I think you summarized that perfectly. And Guardian caps have been an awesome introduction to the NFL. And I know players that I'm still friends with personally who say, wearing that, they can feel the load on their bodies. And maybe, after you go through a long practice, you're just a bit drained, maybe you're a little mentally foggy. They can even feel that, hey, I feel better after practice. Maybe if you're a lineman or a tight end, you have that constant just hitting, maybe you don't have that, little headaches that you kind of have at the end of the day, and they've told me that firsthand that it's been a good change. So that's fantastic, and certainly good advice there to the parents. The understanding of professional versus amateur, that's a big difference. So this kind of information is awesome for parents, but are you seeing coaches and players respond to this information and guidance the same? Are they receptive? Do you feel like maybe there's still some hesitancy to embrace things like Guardian caps or this data that's coming out? Talk a little bit about that.
So this just leads us to the value of data, because it doesn't matter what your opinion is. When the data says something, eventually the decision will be made for you, right? Me personally, just use Guardian caps. I wasn't sure what would happen when people started wearing it. But then you start seeing things like, reducing the amount of concussions in training camp, reducing the amount of concussions in practice. And then now all 32 teams in the NFL make the athletes wear it. That tells you that data won. You start to see the Power Five conferences in college football making people wear it. That tells you that the data won. You start to understand that biometric data tracking. I've seen professional sports trainers and strength coaches tell an athlete, nope, that's enough high speed sprints for today. Because now you've reached a place where you're at risk of creating lower extremity injuries. Lower extremity injuries are devastating for the performance and availability of professional athletes in so many different sports. But we're not able to understand when a person is at risk without the data. So, yes, there are some people that are resistant as athletes, some people that are resistant as coaches. But the more we can show people the data and the more we show people how effective it is at keeping people healthy and keeping people available so they can go play the sport that they love, it starts to create change that comes from a level above the head of the coach and the player. And so I tell people it's hard sometimes to be patient with science and data and technology because we're like, I want the answer now. I want the change right now. But sometimes we have to have big data sets, or sometimes we have to have longitudinal data sets over years and years and years. But think about the work you guys have been doing for 11 years in the NFL. That's unrefutable. And without it, there would never be that same resource for the people on the health and safety side to be able to combat some of these unsupported beliefs and ideas that players or coaches may have.
Yeah, great point. Look at the dynamic kickoff rule now in the NFL. That's all based off of data and looking at the trends of where those violent injuries were coming from. And yeah, the Guardian caps, it's been really interesting to see it going from training camp to practice to now. There's a handful of players of each club that are out there wearing the Guardian caps, painted their helmet with coloration, which I look at that and I'm like, that's a smart ball player. Look, it doesn't look sexy. And I've been in locker rooms where guys aren't going to put something on if it doesn't give them the right look, right? Now, Patrick Mahomes, when you look at him compared to everybody else, he's got that big old pro-rated concussion, one of the best rated helmets that's out there. And he's doing a really smart thing for himself. And you guys have been in locker rooms and, folks who haven't been into an NFL locker room before, but the NFL puts out every season, the upgraded health ratings of the shoulder pads to the helmets. And they have options, but they're all rated for NFL use, but some have a higher degree, which also means they might be a little bit heavier. So you have to balance all these things. But the players, I feel, are getting more and more educated, Julius, which is great to see. And then individuals like yourself helping to be able to tell that story, provide the data, advocate. We're only going to continue to see players have better health and have longer careers because of the equipment, because of the data behind it, and formulating that all together to get that maximum threshold of what they can put their body through season in, season out. So I do want to ask you, because we have you here, as far as being a retired player, being invested in everything that goes on with the NFL and being an alumnus of it all, do you still actively watch games on a weekly basis? Do you have favorite teams that you're looking out for? Do you have coaches that you reach out to on the side? What is it like being a fan of the game, and what teams are you following?
Yeah, it's different. I will say that it's not what I thought it would be like when I was a 9-year-old kid at Network Associates Coliseum in Oakland, California, on that third tier, screaming for the Raiders. Right? Like, it's changed a little bit. People sometimes ask me, "What's your favorite team?" And I say that's probably the biggest change. It's like I don't really have a favorite team anymore, but I appreciate great athletes. For example, there's something that happened recently, right? It's like the Packers are playing the Lions last night, and it's like, we got game of the week. We got 2 NFC Norths. This is important, right? This is seeding. This is dominance. This is, confidence in your division, right? I'm going to watch that game. I'm going to sit back. And I unfortunately am not able to watch as a fan. I watch like I'm watching film all the time, so I don't watch as much because then I find myself going to bed and like my heart's beating faster than it should be, and I'm mad that the coordinator called that particular concept versus these coverages they've been seeing throughout the game, and I'm like, and here's my bias, and I'm like, dang, coaches lose games too, even though they don't get as much heat for it. But yeah, I still watch football. I don't watch football as often by myself because I get worked up. But I watch college football too. I think that football is a tremendous sport, seeing just everything that goes into it. the hard work, the sacrifice, the teamwork, the commitment to understand and be at the highest level of your profession is amazing. And I think for me now, where I sit, my biggest focus is how can I decrease suffering on the back end, right? Like, how can I decrease suffering on the back end? And that's what you were talking about earlier, is that's how we can take the data and we can take this information we have. And really, that's all that it's for. It's to make you perform at the highest level while you're playing safely. But the true benefit of that is to reduce the suffering on the back end. I feel sorry for the guys that I know in the football players health study at Harvard that are in their 60s and they're really banged up. And they're like, man, I can't even imagine what playing today's game would be like, how much different my body may feel. And I tell them, man, kudos to you guys for putting it all on the line and then standing up for player health and safety so we can be at this point today. And I'll say the same thing to Zebra. Kudos to you guys for allowing us to have the products that we need to continue making the game safer, which results to a happier, less suffering former player. And I think we could all be proud of that work that you guys do, because this is what it results in. And sometimes it's hard to see that if you're not reminded, or you're not able to recognize, like, wait, everything that you guys get up and do every day, all those employees that you mentioned from all those different departments and areas of the corporate system, it has a meaning, it has a value, and it's allowing us to change the game for pros, which eventually gets translated into us changing the game for kids, possibly even their own kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And just to comment there, Hale, before your next question, certainly, the next gen stats program, right? Like, they're creating the next generation of statistics, telling some really neat stories along the way. And yeah, we have a phenomenal team and you guys can appreciate this, is that the football season is a grind between Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night. Heck, the NFL plays on Fridays, Saturday. It is a long season, and our team does a great job of getting ready for the NFL season by tuning our system. And all of that came from the things we were doing in healthcare and in logistics, where we're tracking the assets, or if it's safety officials going out to the loading dock, going past the threshold, being able to know in real time where they're at. It's a great use case, but certainly we're very proud of everything that the Zebra Sports, Zebra Nation's doing to support the NFL and tell these neat stories, and be able to give the teams some really good data about how they can optimize and keep their players safe and healthy. Hale, back to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love what you said there, Adam. And Julius, we're about ready to wrap up, but here's more of a fun question for you. I know the relationship between quarterback and tight end is special bond, right? You've been a fantastic podcast. I can't, recommend enough you as an interview subject for anybody out there. But what do we have to do to get you on a episode of Peyton and Eli's Monday Night Football? Because certainly your guy out there needs to have you on there to talk about player health and safety.
So that's a great question, and people ask me that all the time. And I'll be real with you guys. I'll give you guys my real answer to this. I'm waiting till I get the doctorate. I'm waiting, right? Like I get that on the wall, and then I get to sit down in front of America after an 8-year journey of going from my own transition and for the reason I went through it, and then to be able to talk intelligently about the things that I've learned and about the companies that I've partnered with, and to be able to have a really robust conversation. I think that's going to be a perfect thing. We know that PR matters, and I think that we'll get somebody in their PR team to be like, "Hey, see, okay, now he's ready. Your former tight end, now your doctor tight end, and he's here to talk about player health and safety. He's committed the time. He's put in the work. I mean, even me, I'm going to do like a shameless ask while I'm here on the podcast to you guys, and it's like, Adam, man, like, can I come be nosy? Can I see the data? Like, this is something that you guys would let me come check it out, because I get fascinated looking at data, and it's like, man, like, what's interesting is because you talked about the history of the data tracking and the value in logistics, and then the value in health. But what I'm interested is really this cusp of we're now tracking performance. Like, people talk to me all the time, like, we're not going to make health prevention happen until we track prevention. But it's just moving and showing that there's this whole new lane that's valuable, that's important, that I'm really excited in, and I would love to come nerd out and sit and look at some of the next gen stats data you guys have when it comes hot off the.
That's it. Hey, we're gonna put you on our short list and get that distro right over to you every day, every week.
Wait. Oh, wait, I can get it? You can send me?
We'll get you a very specialized report. We have
Please.
the capability to do that. Outside, of course, what's specific to the NFL, we can share some very important highlights and insights. And yeah, you'll love it, and we appreciate that. And look, Julius, your passion for what you're doing in your field of study, what you're doing across the world of sports, the information that you're sharing with parents, families about the game, about taking responsibility for your health, the prevention, the looking at the joy span of your own lifestyle. I think we all are walking away in the psychological security aspect. I mean, I love everything that you've brought to attention here. The cerebral conversation that we've had today will have an impact for a long time. And we look forward to staying in touch. We definitely want to have you back after the doctorate. We want to see you on the Manning cast. We want to see that. And if you are watching the YouTube, you got to see Julius's background. Hale mentioned earlier, he's got one of the best office background setups that I've seen in a long time.
Right.
But good job on you. You did a great job in styling that. And this has been just a phenomenal experience today. We really appreciate your realness, your candor, sharing with us life during, life after, and certainly the impact that you're going to make for the years to come will no doubt, hard to say, hard to believe, but outshine all the records that you have on the football field. There's no doubt greatness awaits you, and it's going to be an awesome journey to stay in touch and to see it happen. And we thank you so much for being on the show today.
It will, absolutely. Thank you guys. I've had a tremendous time. It's been fun. As you guys can tell, I'm a nerd at heart, and I was suppressing that part of me when I was playing, but now it's on full display. I appreciate the invitation for the report and to get a chance to come meet your teams and see what you guys are doing, like on location. I would love that. You guys have been great. Have me on whenever. Hale, man, so happy for you in this transition and how you're stepping into your next thing. I would love to get you to a pack event sometime so you can come be around some more of the community and network with other guys like us that played at the highest level. And now we're trying to find other ways to make impact and keep pushing ourselves to be the best. And then I'm going to take you up on that, Adam, and we're going to have a drink and we're going to talk about this journey that you've had so I can grab some more of that inspiration. But thank you guys so much. You've been awesome. And I can't wait until we do it again.
Deal and deal. And hey, we encourage everyone to follow Julius, his company, Optimal Performance at Optimal, and the continuing conversation around player health and safety in sports. Additionally, you can tune in to past Chalk Talk episodes on Zebra Technologies YouTube channel or at Zebra. And from all of us here at Chalk Talk, I'm Adam Petrus.
And I'm Hale Henches.
And we will see you next time.